a lot of people that tend to think, well, we have to, like, in all ways of life, be the complete opposite of the culture, and then, like, that's the way we're supposed to do life. Like, you cannot read the apostles, especially Paul, and believe that, like, at all. Like, when he says, like, I became X so that I could win some, like, he wasn't going into that city or that people group basically trash talking them about who they were in every ounce of their being, and then expecting to walk out of that town with some. It's like, I became a Gentile to win Gentiles, becoming the law to win those under the law, and so on and so on and so on.
Uh-huh.
And so the idea, like, of the trads who are like, we just got to keep being this, and then they'll flock to us, like, that just doesn't make sense.
Right.
But at the same time, like, being modern doesn't mean you give up orthodoxy.
Well, welcome to City Square Podcast, where we talk to everyday people about faith and work. My name is Micah. My guests tonight are Rory Fry and Jon Herrera. Rory lives in Central Texas. He's a husband, father. He runs a Facebook page called Restored and Recovered, and he is beginning the specific ministry program to become a pastor in a Waco area church plant of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Jon lives in San Antonio. He is the co-founder and co-host of City Square Podcast, this podcast. He's an elder candidate at Redemption Hill Church. He spent about 7 years, I think, planning a church in West Texas, and he runs a company called Orijo Solutions with his wife. Did I say that right, Jon?
Yeah, you're good, man.
Thanks, guys, for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Dude, I'm glad to be a guest on my own podcast for the first time since, I think, the first week.
That's true, yeah. We haven't really done any guesting since. We'll have a discussion or two, but yeah.
Yeah.
We are going to talk a bit. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
No, now it's awkward.
All right. I want to know, for Rory, you're in Central Texas.
Yep.
Do you consider San Antonio Central Texas or South Texas?
It's a good question. So I always thought it was Central Texas, but
so did I.
Yeah. So, but my buddy, who's a lifelong San Antonio, or whatever you say that, he calls it South Texas. So
yeah, I find that insane. I'm trying to get people to, like, at least maybe compromise to call it, like, South Central Texas.
There we go.
But yeah.
Well, I'm trying to think of what the absolute correct term for your region, Rory, because you're in Waco area, not exactly.
No,
Waco,
not yet.
right?
I'm in Harker Heights, so I'm near Killeen, Fort Hood.
Okay.
Moving to Waco.
Yeah. Which is what, an hour away from you right now?
Yeah, 45 minutes an hour. Yeah.
It's all the same thing, right?
Yeah, Waco is booming, man.
It is. Yep.
Yeah. Which is nice because that place was a dump.
A lot of it still is kind of a dump. So technically, we won't be in Waco. We'll be in a little town called Robinson that's right next to it.
Okay.
And Robinson is like, they call it like a rural town in a big city area or something like that. So it's the main restaurant's named after the high school football team, like real kind of small town stuff, but it's literally right down the street from Waco.
What's the population?
There was when we lived in Dallas and I would travel to Austin to visit my parents, we would always stop at the Common Grounds coffee shop in Waco as kind of like our midway point. That place was and still is, I assume, phenomenal.
I don't think I've been there. I'll have to check it out.
You'll have to check it out, man. They built a second location, but the original one, which that's always the best of anything to go to, right? Like, it's always the original, was like right across the street from Baylor.
Oh, okay. So so a little further into Waco then.
What's the population of Robinson?
Like 10,000 people.
Okay.
Well, that's not bad.
No, it's not like super small.
Yeah.
They have a McDonald's. They have a Brookshire's.
Brookshires, man.
Not big enough to get the HEB, but we got the Brookshire.
That's a small town grocery store, Brookshires. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the highlight of the conversation right there.
Yeah.
Brookshires. Maybe one day we'll get a Kroger. So I do want to talk church planning and stuff, but I figured we could do like basic beliefs and stuff, get that out of the way. So, Roy, you are former CRC, Christian Reformed Church?
Christian Reformed Church, yeah.
Okay. And now LCMS. What would you say just are the major differences now, where you are now?
So, like...
high level.
It's kind of a loaded question, right? Because I think there's a lot of differences. And I think those differences sometimes can be passed off as minor, but I think they're major. But we'll put that over there. But so CRC, being traditional Reformed, it's more of a covenantal theology. So there's no real covenant theology in Lutheranism. That's a big one. No covenant of works, no covenant of grace. And I just think Lutheranism is easier, long gospel. And my reading this passage is this condemning me? Is it challenging me? Or is it comforting me? I think it's easier way to, kind of read the Bible. And then just the sacramentalism and the more objective assurances that to me was really kind of one of the reasons I shifted over. And then kind of dealing with like the topics of apostasy. I think that was a big one too, because I wanted to hold on to the perseverance of the saints for a long time, but it just got harder and harder as I kind of bump up against things like the book of Hebrews and certain passages in the Bible. And I just came to the conclusion, I'm like, I think the Bible's saying both. I think it's saying that Jesus keeps us, but there's a possibility of apostasy. And I held that belief for a long time. And, I talked to Reform guys that they'll give you that sideways glance, like that doesn't make any sense. And then I read Jordan Cooper's The Great Divide, and he was talking about that same thing. And I was like, I think I might be holding Lutheran views already as it is.
Unknowingly.
Yeah, kind of like unknowingly. So that, I guess, just kind of less of the theology built on the invisible will of God, whereas Lutheranism is kind of building more stuff on the revealed will of God, what the Word of God actually says, what it clearly says, and trying to do your theology and live your faith and all that in what is clearly said and not so much the invisible will of God. Like, at least that's what I always thought Calvinism was. I could have been completely wrong. I can admit that. So.
Well, now that you're not a Calvinist, you don't understand Calvinism. As a former Calvinist, I don't understand Calvinism now too. Anyways, I'm not trying to give Jon a hard time since he's a Calvinist, but I think that's the most common argument I see in kind of the forums online or the Facebook groups, is that if you leave a theological system, because I think Catholics do this too, it's you didn't understand it, so.
Yeah.
Which
and
I just think,
usually, you didn't understand Calvinism, and it's like, maybe not, but I tried very hard to,
Yeah. We'll allow it. What about you, Jon? Do you have a confession?
It's kind of leading with the chin. It's but I don't think, just from hearing Jon's conversations, I never talked to him before, but I don't think. Now, okay, Jon, would you make that claim that if we left Calvinism, we never really understood it in the first place?
I wouldn't say that's true, but I could say it's possible.
That's fair.
I mean, like, everybody's an expert in something until they realize they're not an expert in it.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think I've listened to you talk about Reformed theology. I think it was a Zach Lee's episode. And I think y'all, one of the things y'all both said was the issue y'all had with Reformed theology was that it was a works-based salvation. And I
Did I say
not
that?
comprehend how. I think it was you.
Oh.
I could be wrong. I don't want to misrepresent you. So you're right here, so you can represent yourself just well.
No,
I thought it was you.
I don't think I said that. No, unless we're talking about like the covenant of works or something like that, then I think that could be. But
yeah,
no,
no. I've heard a couple people say that on here before, and I've seen people say like on Twitter. Even with Elon Musk running Twitter, it's still a dumpster fire. It's just a different dumpster fire. And so, like,
no, this is actually where I'm at with all this stuff. Like, even with the ordinations, like me and Micah were kind of talking about contemporary versus traditional. I want a strong man as many people as I can. I really don't want to do. I don't want to do the straw man, and I don't want to do the character.
Yeah,
I notice that's kind of what happens, especially on online forums. I think it's just a lot of straw manning going on. So I'll still. I mean, even in the last year, I've read the Irish articles. I've read the Belgic confession. I've read multiple of the Reformed confessions. I read Gordon Clark. I really do want to understand it a lot. So I can represent it the best that I possibly can and deal with people and relate with people as best as I honestly can. So I would say there is a lot of caricaturing going on. I think a lot of Lutherans caricature the heck out of Calvinists, and that could be one of the things that they're saying.
No, that's fair, man. I think that's fair. That's honest, man. Because I mean that does happen. That's one of the downsides to social media and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
is the caricaturing of stuff, and so like that happens, man. Reformed people are terrible about it. The more Micah gets connected with the Lutheran trolls on the internet that I see come up in my feeds, there's that fair share of it there, and many other. Every tribe's got their toxic wasteland, unfortunately.
right.
There's cage stage in every theological denomination, or mainstream of theology,
Yeah.
So what
I've talked about with Mike on here before is mostly like I think with the issue of assurance and just now I don't know if you hold to like the double predestination, but navigating the world of double predestination, which the three forms of unity, which the Christian Reformed Church, subscribes to, or claims to, whatever they do these days. It's getting hard to tell over there. They would be single predestination. But if we're talking about double predestination, it's very hard for me to find assurance within that because there's a very real possibility that I might not be elect. I might think I'm elect. I might be one of those hypocrites who's been self-deceived this entire time. So for me, it was kind of hard to see assurance in that. And that's where looking at Lutheran predestination, it's there, but it's really brought in more for assurance. It's brought in more for comfort, not in this possibility that you are being damned before the beginning of time or something like that. So
yeah, we got right into the controversial part. Just rip the Band-Aid off. So John, do you have a confession that you hold to?
That's your fourth time you've tried to ask that question, right?
Well, it's been a good conversation, so I let it go.
I'm getting there, man. I'm getting there. Because the Reformed circles that I would probably say I was raised up in were probably more Reformed light than they were capital R Reformed.
Mm-hmm.
And so kind of develop my theology in the Acts 29 SBC evangelical realm. Being Reformed basically means tulip.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there's usually not a lot of heavy digging into creeds and confessions and that kind of thing. Usually there's not.
Yeah.
And so generally speaking, when I tell people that I'm Reformed, that usually means I'm good with tulip for the most part. For the most part, meaning I'm good with it. I'm good with the five solas. I'm good with those two things, man. So for me, I'm fine with saying I'm Reformed because I affirm those things. I'm trying to become more familiar with creeds and confessions over time. So Rory asked me if I was a 1689 guy. I was like, I mean, to an extent, man, like, yeah. Like, I think one of my biggest issues probably the 1689 is I still believe like that the elders lead the church, and the 1689 doesn't go in line with that. That's the biggest one off the top of my head that I can think of where I'm like, yeah, like for the most part, yeah, but I'm kind of straight away there. And so I'm coming around, man. Like, I try to be quick to listen and slow to change because I think there's discernment in that. And so, like, just because, and like I've said, I think I've said in some conversations, just because something's old doesn't mean that it deserves to be affirmed. It deserves to have your attention and to be given your time to. But like, just because something was 500 or 1,000 years old doesn't necessarily mean that like it deserves to be affirmed. And so, and there's also like a lot of like confessions that have been written over time for a lot of different reasons. And so, like, I mean, for the most part, like I'm cool with like 689. There's a lot of things within the Westminster that I'm cool with, and one of the elders at the church I'm at now, like, is really influenced by Anglicanism. So like I'm trying to like dive into that more than I have in the past as well. And so like right now I'm still learning and working on figuring a lot of that stuff out.
Yeah, you got the beard for Anglicanism, so that's good.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, there's some excellent beards at John's church. Like,
there is, man.
I don't know if excellent's even the right word. I mean, that's mild. Stupendous. Yeah. Flabbergasting. Like, John's is a great beard, right? But it's nothing compared to some of the ones I've seen there. So
wow,
it's not. It's compared to most of the beers that I'm surrounded by. It's humbling.
What's the name of the church you go to?
It's, Redemption Hill in San Antonio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're non-denom, but they are very liturgical. So interesting.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I was fascinated when John actually like found that one, and we were talking about it. So
yeah, I guess that makes sense why there's some Anglican influence going on there then.
No, yeah, for sure. And they're interesting, man. I'm trying to figure out how they understand deacons. I've been trying to figure that out for a couple months now. I was asking Micah about that. Yeah, because the way they understand deacons is drastically different than what a lot of Reformed churches do with deacons. And most Baptists just don't know what a deacon is, unless they're probably in more of the Reform lanes. But like within the Anglican churches, a lot of the way deacons function, to me, is similar to like how the pastors or the elders should function. And so I'm really curious about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like an office of the word in a sense. They handle some liturgical duties, So
they provide pastoral care to the pastors on staff as well, which is confusing to me.
Right.
And part of the reason it's confusing to me is because,
I get confused on this too. I don't want to speak on, I've been asking around quite a bit too, the LCMS's stance on, I know we have deaconesses and that's a called position. I don't know if we have called deacons, but I think depending on the church you go to, like Fortress, the one that I'm still technically a member of, even though I go to Gathering in Robinson, they have elders, and the elders are kind of there for what you're saying, for pastoral support for the pastor. They don't do anything in the service, but they're really just there to help the pastor, make sure he's not getting weird or anything like that.
Yeah, I think growing up Baptist, the elders in the LCMS churches that I've encountered function like deacons did in the Baptist churches that I was part of. But there are some Baptist churches where the deacons function like elders in a Reformed church. Mm. So hopefully I'm not getting too down the rabbit hole, because like an elder in my experience was kind of interchangeable with pastor, at least in the Reformed traditions. I think they're more often kind of like they go together essentially. Whereas in a lot of times the Baptist churches, the deacons function in kind of pastoral oversight roles as well. So then when I got to the LCMS, there was this elder board that really functions like the deacons did in my Baptist church. So it's very interesting how the same title applies very differently in like the three main streams that I've been, a part of. So, and I think deacons does that as well. There used to be deacons in the LCMS, and it was like a almost lay pastor role. And I think there were, I think there were some like abuses and some like problems with some of how that was working out. So they phased it out slowly. So yeah, it's interesting.
And then you throw in vicars. We have vicars. I'll be one in a couple months. So, so like in like John, your church, there's probably no talk about like vicars or anything like that, right?
No, man. For the people watching, can you define what that is?
I would just call it pastor in training.
It's really like a pastor in training,
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
It comes from vicarious, so it's really a vicar is kind of a stand-in for a pastor also, right? So Fortress Church didn't have a pastor. They had a vicar. He's now ordained. He's being installed this Sunday. So he was essentially doing the pastor stuff because he's a called vicar. He just wasn't ordained as a pastor yet. So he was kind of doing that stand-in for.
So you're considered a vicar then, right?
I'll be officially installed as a vicar in September.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not to jump the gun here.
Sure.
But when are you going to plant the church?
So let's talk about that a little bit. So, and this was kind of going to go to some questions that I was going to ask you about kind of the process for like you and when you were doing your church planting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to a church plant. I would be ordained in 2.5 years, hopefully, unless, the world ends or something crazy happens. I would be ordained as what my pastor's calling a Timothy pastor. So that's the pastor who would come in once the church planner moves on, retires, goes somewhere else. Then the Timothy pastor would take over the church. So taking over a church plant. But for the district of the LCMS, I'm approved as a church planner. So I'm not actually planting a church right now, but I've been approved. Okay. I've gone through the process to become a church planter.
Okay, so the LCMS approves you as qualified to go and plant a church.
Yes.
But you're not going to plant a church.
No.
You're going to go pastor a church that has been planted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like an elder on staff there, or like you're going to be the pastor on, or like what's that look like?
Yeah, so it would be the title would be vicar until I'm ordained as the pastor. So with SMP, ordination is 2.5 years into the program. But yeah, I would be on staff as the vicar. So that would be really doing different kind of pastoral duties for gathering.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And so like, is there going to be a pastor there, like kind of overseeing you? Okay.
Yes.
And then
Okay. Yeah. So SMPs will, as far as I know, SMPs will always have a supervisor. Even after ordination, they're still going to have a supervisor. My situation is a little different than the average SMP because my pastor is an SMP. So an SMP can't oversee SMPs. An SMP has to have an MDiv as a supervisor. So I'll be vicar at Gathering, working for Gathering, and essentially being Pastor Jerry Harrow's understudy. He's the pastor at Gathering. But then I'll be supervised by the Reverend Dr., right? You got to put it out there. The Reverend Dr. Brian Hesse, and he's the pastor of a church at Belmead. So technically he'll be my SMP supervisor. And Pastor Jerry is going to teach me the ins and outs of running a church.
All right. What's an SMP?
Specific ministry pastor. So instead of a general pastor, it's being ordained to run a particular church.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a program designed to help with the shortage of pastors. So it's mostly, I would say, it's mostly second career guys who don't have they can't pack up and move for 4 years to get an MDiv. Yeah. So they do this sort of hybrid program with, what's the degree you'll at the end of this, what's the degree that you'll have?
It's just ordination and then a certificate. There's not actually a degree. You can go another 2 years and then you can become a general pastor. So then you could take a general call. But it's just
meaning any church in the LCMS could then call you, right?
If they're calling a general pastor, if they're calling an MDiv, no, right? It's still not quite a master's of divinity. It would be a master's, but then you would just be a general. Yeah, John's head's probably his head's probably going to explode over there because it gets a little confusing.
I will say it's nowhere near as complex as the Anglican system, because when I was talking to Father James Gadd a few months ago, he was talking about how he was the rector at this church, then he wants to be, and then there's like 3, because they go through, like, you go to a lot of them anyway, maybe not all, I'm not sure. They go into the diaconate first, so they can become a deacon, and then that's like a stepping stone. If they want to stay there, I think they can, but then that's oftentimes a stepping stone to being a rector. I think those sometimes there's words that they're using that maybe describe the function, and whereas he is a priest, right? Or what we would say pastor. Right. So I think there's different ecclesiastical words to describe what they're doing, but then this title is, priest or whatever. So it's way over my head.
I want to make sure I understand.
And then I think a priest, I don't know. I mean, I've read a little bit on Anglicanism. I have a friend who's coming out of it, who's LCMS now, and Anglicanism is very confusing. Even if you read their literature, they're like, we're kind of Calvinist, but we're kind of not. We're kind of this. It's like, I mean, cool. It's just, it's hard to nail down Jello. Let's just leave it.
To all the Anglicans out there, we're calling you Jello. Sorry. Rory's calling you Jello.
Their piety. I use an Anglican prayer app every day. I think the Book of Common Prayer is beautiful. And that's kind of their unifying, that is kind of their confession, is their book of Common Prayer. I think it's beautiful. I just don't. Yeah, I don't understand much of it besides that. But.
Yeah, outside looking in, it's confusing. What were you going to ask, John?
Yeah, sorry, I cut you off.
So I just want to make sure, like, I kind of understand, like, what Rory's doing.
Yeah.
So you're going to a church that has been planted.
Yes.
And you'll be a vicar there for about 2.5 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you're done with that, are you going to be an SMP?
I would be an SMP pastor. SMP is the 4-year. The SMP is like the 4-year seminary program.
Right. Okay.
So I would be,
and then so that's like your goal, correct?
I mean, yeah.
For the time being.
Yes.
Okay. And then there will be another pastor on staff there, right, with you?
Well, once I'm the way it's. We could talk in hypotheticals, right? I mean, all of this.
Okay.
We know it's the church world. This could all change. This could all change tomorrow.
This could have already changed and you don't even know
it. Right. And then you're a fire alarm and fire extinguisher guy getting thrown in here trying to, become this ordained individual, right? But no, so, I mean, if gathering all goes according to plan, so Pastor Jerry's looking to retire in the next couple of years. So once he retires, I would be the pastor of that church.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you have to attend more of the schooling, or would you be good on that?
Technically, no. It's a 4-year program. You're ordained. Like I said, you're ordained at 2.5 years. And then there's another 1.5 years of, continuing education after that. You don't have to.
All right.
Pastor Jerry is an S&P. He didn't go any further. They do have one thing that's called a GPC. That's kind of Concordia's next step up for an S&P in case, say you're an S&P and you don't want to be at the same church the rest of your career, then you could go GPC and then you have more options. Now, if you're an S&P, you love where you're at, you don't ever want to leave, then you wouldn't technically never need to, I think there's probably some continuing education, but you would never need to go pursue another degree or anything like that. You could be an S&P.
The S&P really is for a either specific ministry or a specific church. So it's very focused and very intentional, and it's not the same as like someone who went straight from their bachelor's into their MDiv and then could go to whatever church that wanted him.
Okay.
So it's a very specific context.
So like
it's a different shorter than your vicarage.
Did the program that you're going through? This is not a personal question. It's more of a denominational question. Is it something that did your church pay for this? Did the denomination pay for this? Did you have to pay for it?
Yeah, no, they're supporting it. So that's part of what that's part of what the fundraising is doing too. So we're fundraising for the Timothy Fund to help pay for it.
All right.
Yeah. No, I mean,
and so like,
you got, I think it's another $40,000-$50,000, college program, right? So yeah. I couldn't speak for everybody. If you look at the S&P paperwork, it does strongly suggest that the churches support their vicars. But I mean, if you're at a tiny church that doesn't have any ways of getting funds, then I guess you potentially could be paying for it. But as it stands, I won't be paying for it.
Cool. So what if you go to, is it Robinson?
Yeah.
For like 4 or 5 years, and then you're like, well, I want to go to church in like Houston. Then what would happen? Yeah.
So if I was a GPC, then I could really go anywhere. But I think being a church planter, so Pastor Jerry is a S&P. He technically never should have left the church that he started. He comes from Colorado. He technically never should have left that. He's ordained for that. So when we say specific ministry, that'd be like saying, John, you are ordained only as a pastor for Redemption Hill Church, right?
Right.
You have full pastoral privileges there, but it's only at that church. I think the church planting element, though, I think that would enable you to start churches to go somewhere else and give you a little bit more liberty that a bare bones S&P might not have. Now, I don't actually know the technicalities of it. Maybe I think churches can call if they're looking for an S&P pastor. I think they can call. I don't know how all that works. But I think if a church wanted to call an S&P pastor, I think you could in that circumstance. But I'm not entirely sure. Yeah.
All right, man, I'm done with questions for now.
No, I mean, it's good because I really wanted to talk to you because you've done church planting, all that kind of stuff. So we go.
Yeah, it was drastically different.
Yeah, what did like and this again. I've been thinking about this a lot today. The caricatures. Sometimes, the non-denoms, they go get the idea. I'm going to go start a church if they start a church, right? Like I'm sure it wasn't like that.
Not completely, man. Not completely. It was drastically different, man. I would like to think that if I could go back and do it again, I'd probably do it differently. But I probably wouldn't. That's just being honest. Because I always say I'll do something different, and then I'll go and do that thing not differently in the future.
Right.
Because even with the business I have, I'd be like, man, if I go back and do it again, no, I'm not fooling myself. I'd probably do the exact same thing. And so it was just different, man. And so, I didn't just get the idea, I'm going to go plant a church, then went to plant a church. It wasn't like that. But it was significantly probably more quote unquote organic, than it was a process. And so I had wanted, like my wife and I were trying to figure out like how we were going to move to West Texas and go plant a church for a couple of years. And I was looking for like a lot of different things. So I was like, okay, like I had taken an assessment with the SBC.
Okay.
And they basically, their assessment said, no, not yet.
Oh, okay.
I was like, okay, cool, man. It's like, well, can y'all set me up with like a program or something, like maybe a church that will like train people to go plant churches, like that kind of thing? Because they're like, your character, like we're cool with your character, your spousal support, like those things are all solid. But they just said like at where you're at in, like you probably like are at in life, like something about who I was in the moment. They're like, not yet.
Okay.
But they wouldn't hook me up with like a church in DFW that like liked training and sending people out. They could not do that, which is remarkable, by the way.
Yeah.
And so like I just kept plugging in.
Sense. Remarkable in a bad sense. This is negative.
Yeah, like it's negative. And so like I just like at the church I was at then, I just kept trying to get as much like lay experience as I possibly could.
Gotcha.
Getting as much lay experience as I possibly could, building the best relationships with my pastors as I possibly could, and like listening to the people that were the spiritual leaders like in my life at that time. And then a couple years later, I got offered a job by a job I hadn't applied for, by a person I hadn't talked to in years in the town where we wanted to go plant a church. And I was like, oh, okay, this is cool.
Yeah.
But it was a job at like the university, the nonprofit with the university out there. And I was like, okay, well maybe like this is like God opening a door kind of thing. And so like I didn't just go and like quit my job and move out there.
Uh-huh.
Like I talked to my pastors at my church. I talked to spiritual leaders in my life, and I was like, "Hey, here's what's happened." I was like, "What do y'all think about this? Do y'all red light this, green light this, or whatever?" And I was like, when I'm asking about this, like about me, my situation, my family, and so like everybody that I trusted in my life, who I would listen to for spiritual guidance, they all greenlit that. And then so we moved out there to go plant a church. And then I tried to set myself up with like overseers, people that would hold me accountable, encourage me, like speak into this and that kind of thing. Like Micah was one of those people, like, and a couple pastors and that kind of those people. People that knew me, people that had seen me do dumb things before, people I'd see me get upset, like we had fun together, like people who knew who I was.
Yeah.
And like and then like about a year into it, one of the guys, somebody told me to apply with the SBC again. I was like, I don't want to, man. I was like, that didn't go. Then 3 years ago, however long ago, that didn't go well. I was like, honestly, I'm just not a fan of the SBC to begin with. And so like they talked me into it, which was not the worst thing in the world, honestly. This time they basically greenlit me, and like I got like $50,000 worth of funding.
Oh, okay, cool.
And so like, yeah, and the SBC is a dumpster fire. It's what it is, man. But like on a local level, like they're actually really helpful.
Sure.
Like the guy that was over like our district, like the west portion of Texas, like that guy was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
He was awesome. He was really helpful, really supportive. Like he was great. On a national level, those guys suck. That's just
I mean,
like I'm fine with it, man.
Jumping off right now, right? Like all that fun stuff going on.
And so like I would like to have done something probably closer to what you're doing, like honestly. Like back then, like I wanted to be approved by like Acts 29 back then, but like I kind of realized at some point like there was kind of like this idolatry kind of issue I had with Acts 29 back then, and so I kind of like I started their application then quit it.
Mm-hmm.
It was also really long, and it was also not like it was like a multi-year thing, which once again was not a bad thing. But like their application process was also not helpful for people who had to work a real job.
Gotcha.
And that's the issue like that I see with like a lot of those programs. Like one, if you have to have like deep pockets to even take part in it. You also have to somehow have deep pockets but not work. Like even like the church I was, yeah, man, like it was weird because the church I was at in Dallas, like they actually had church planning program, like pros for people to go plant church, but like they were like 30 hours a week. They were also like complementarian, and like men were supposed to work and provide for the household, but you're supposed to spend 30 hours a week doing a church planning residency,
right?
And so like that was also kind of like confusing.
Yeah.
So I think that answers some of the questions you might have had.
Yeah. No, I mean,
go ahead.
The beginning stages of your, I guess your journey or whatever, it sounds a lot like the process I've been through. So that's really, it's not the first step, but so with the I guess we should back it up when we get to, so with the SMP, like Micah couldn't just walk down to the district and be like, I want to be an SMP. They're going to be like, okay, find a church that wants you to be the SMP, right? So you have to be backed by a church. There has to be a congregation, a pastor, and so in my case, 2 pastors that are willing to take you on, because they go through it. They go through it with you. You meet up with them weekly. You're doing assignments with them. I mean, I'm going to St. Louis in August for a week. My supervisor's coming with me. He's got to go to seminary orientation, right? So that was kind of the first step in the process. So get this pastoral support. But then you have to go to the district and get assessed. So Pastor Jerry, being a church planter, wants to be ascending church. So that's why he sends us over there to get assessed as a church planter. When we're starting that process, Larry, he's one of the district assessors, he'll kind of tell you like you were saying here, okay, hey, we're going to take this thing called a Harrison assessment. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, but it's this personality. It's really weird. Like you answer like 50 questions and it really kind of describes you very well. But so he tells you like, there's 3 outcomes with this assessment. We give you the green light. I can give you a green light, but down the road, like, hey, let's work with you. Let's develop you and assess you in another couple of years to see if you're ready to go out. And then if, you're just not meant for it, they'll give you the red light. Like, okay, no, good thought, pursue something else. Right. So that kind of sounds similar to yours right there, where they were like, hey, we like this, we like that, but we want some more development essentially in this one area over here. Right. Does that kind of sound like what your experience was?
Yeah, but that's kind of like, that's in a sense kind of how I guess like the SBC assessment worked. It's, from what I've been told, it's different now. But that is kind of like how it worked. Like, and I mean, it's kind of basically, honestly, man, it's kind of like a personality test in a sense.
It's exactly
what this was. Like you're in there. Yeah.
Because basically they don't want to put the wrong guy in the wrong job, right? So that's kind of how they explained it to me too. It's like someone might be a great senior pastor at a mega church, but they might be a terrible church planner. You might be a great associate pastor, but you might just not be head pastor material or something like that. But yeah,
because like if organization is like a really important thing for you, you probably should not be planning a church.
Yep,
because everything is like chaos the whole time.
So I'll tell you,
probably ever the same.
My one red flag. my one red flag was organization. So it was green light. Yes, we're going to move you forward because we want you to get an S&P. But then, I had accountability, and I had to put together an accountability program on developing my organization. Because you're right, that's a key indicator of, it's a trouble characteristic for a planner.
So I improved my organization while I was church planning.
Yeah.
Thrown into the fire, so to speak.
Yeah, that's how I like to do everything. That's what I always say. I'm like, I'm not going to do that next time with the next thing, and that's just never the case.
Learn or don't learn by experience.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's.
I'll do it again, and I'm not going to change.
Well, it does sound like there's a lot of similarities there.
It sounds like you kind of organically were putting together your own vetting process, like you were trying to get people to vet you. And whereas like, it sounds like the LCMS has a lot of structures in place to kind of push candidates through the process to determine they're a good fit or not.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's good. It's at first when they were like, develop an organization plan, I'm like, what are you talking about, man? I ain't doing that. That's what I'm thinking in my head when I'm like, no, you're teachable. This is accountability. This isn't punishment. So they gave me very little guidelines, and he's like, all right, come up with a plan, and we're going to stick to the plan. So the plan for me was, I still do, and I still do this every day. I'm really good at this one still. I clean out the front seat on my work van every day, clean up the trash, put everything back in the same spot. And I would take pictures of that, showing him that every 2 weeks I would take pictures of that, showing that I did that. Then I would keep the back of my van organized, take pictures of that. And then we moved into the house. Like, I'm going to start small. I'm going to keep the front room of my house organized because we got young kids, and sometimes me and my wife aren't. Sometimes we're not all that organized. So it was kind of progressive. Like, my house is my church, right? This is all. I'm not a boss. I'm not a manager. I don't manage people, but I can manage my house. And so that's kind of what the development was. Doing that, taking pictures of it every 2 weeks, and sending it to Larry to show that I'm making progress in that area.
Fascinating.
And I know some people, they're like, I would not. Ain't no one going to get me to take pictures of my house for them. And it's like, well, this is what was required of me, right? So,
gotcha. So they identified that as like a weakness or area of improvement. As we say in the corporate world. What are some?
Yeah, I mean, without saying it, John hit it and he said it straight up. So it's obviously if you're getting assessed for a church planner, hey, we gotta address this right here. So
it's like the Jordan Peterson make your bed sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it really could be. Now, say you're a manager and you want to work on organizing your employees better. You could have done that for it. But like I said, I'm not a manager or anything. Really, all I have is I can manage myself in like the house that I live in. So that's where I did it. And it's little things too, just like keep your computer desk clean. If you read a book, put it back. Like, it's just it's little basic skills like that.
No one is allowed to look at my desk right now. I've got books. I've got piles of mail. I've got, stuff that I should be reading.
Was that
what was that
right there?
Oh, this is liturgical worship by.
I saw by the cover. Nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of the first step. Really for the district, right? So it's been kind of a little bit different because we could really divide my experience up into 3 categories, right? So like the district has to sign off on you. The church has to sign off on you, right? So that's really what this whole so we started going in Christmas. We'd go about once a month. Now we go every month, or we go every week now. It's really becoming a part of that church, making sure that the church likes you and the church signs off on you and the church agrees to call you into this process, because you could go through this and that church could say, no, hey, nice guy, but we don't think he's right for that. So you do that. You're working with the district, you're working with the church, and then there's also the seminary. There's also the seminary component to it too. So to be accepted in the SMP we had to write a bunch of essays. There are 2 interviews with the district, because the district has to approve for you to go to seminary. There were 3 theological exams: Old Testament, New Testament, and then general systematic theology that you got to pass. So yeah, it's like those three categories have all been kind of a part of this whole process for me, if that makes sense.
Tell us a bit then about the gathering, right? Which is that the full name of the church?
Yeah, it's just called Gathering, but yeah, Gathering.
So they're in Robinson, right?
Robinson, yeah.
How many, what's the average attendance?
Yeah, so I'd say about, 30 to 50 people. Currently we meet at a school. So we're still at that phase. We are looking at renting some space to have a more permanent location. So we're moving, right? We're growing. We're getting to the point where they could bring on another employee and get a lease, right? 5-year lease or something like that to, I don't know if you guys ever met in schools before, but they're set up and tear down. I don't do a lot of the setup because I'm driving in at 45 minutes to an hour to get to church right now. But definitely help with the tear down and all that kind of stuff. So being in a building obviously won't have to, putting in the sweat equity so much there.
Yeah. Carrying chairs, there's that meme that goes around about the people impressing girls by carrying all the chairs.
Yeah.
We used to do that.
It's definitely true.
Yeah.
Or we'd think too, cool. The pastor sees me carrying 5 chairs, he's going to want me to be his pupil.
Look at the size of his servant's heart. Look at that.
Oh my gosh.
So, are you going to be bivocational then during the SMP program? What's your structure going to look like? Right.
So not for long. Thank goodness, not for long. Because at first it was talking about you might have to do it for 2 years, and that would be quite a bit, right? Because
that'd be rough.
Full-time work, full-time school, and then whatever church work you're able to squeeze in there. Both of my supervisors though they're like, you'll probably have to do it for a while, but we're going to try very hard to not have you do it for a long time. So basically and again, like I said earlier, right, who knows what could change, but it's looking like early next year, early of 2024, I'll be on full-time over there. So 5-6 months having to do bivocational. Now there's another opportunity that I don't want to get into because it's still in the works, but there's hopefully in August, there's going to be an opportunity for me to reduce my regular job to about a 4-day work week and have some church compensation to do some church work. So that could start in August, but I don't want to get into that right now because it's still, I'll still be worked out or whatever, but yeah.
So okay. And what your seminary starts in August or September? Okay.
September 11th. Yeah.
What's the credit load or the hours kind of that you're going to need to spend there? Yeah,
I'm still trying to get a straight hands around that. Right. So sometimes, and I think it depends on who you talk to, right? Like if I'm a pretty moderate to quick reader, so I'm hoping 10, 15 hours a week. Some guys are saying 20, 25 hours a week. Hopefully we'll see, but it's a school load, whatever it is. It's a school load. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe I know that you have online class every Monday from 6 to 8. That's like every Monday except for breaks. And then you have, as my pastor at Fortress explains it, you have a whole ton of reading that you got to do the first couple of days. And then part of the assignments is you're meeting with the supervisor and you're going over the materials, and he's kind of, showing you or teaching you how all this plays out in the, doing the work of a pastor. So I kind of liken it to, it's like an apprenticeship. It's more of an apprenticeship style seminary than maybe like the MDiv, who just goes and does his, 2.5 years masterwork and then goes, because they do the vicarage at the end of their, or near the end of their of their program. When we have a year, we're jumping in vicar from day one once the school year starts. So
yeah, I think it's when they have like a year and a half left or something like that.
I think so. They do a vicarage for 1 year and then they go back for like a year. But then again, if they have language credits, I don't even know if they have to do that extra year. I think that's mostly to go pick up your Greek and your Hebrew and all that.
Yeah, my church has an SMP pastor, and so he was called as the associate pastor, and primarily with a focus on family ministry.
Okay,
so that's what So I think
that's a possibility too. So I guess just to kind of backtrack what John was asking, it could be that too. It doesn't necessarily mean the SMP is going to be a head pastor. He could be an associate pastor. He could be an outreach pastor. It just happens the way that Fortress, that's the church I'm coming from, and then Gathering, the church I'm going to do the vicarage, they are church plants, and the SMP is being installed as the Timothy pastor as Pastor Jerry moves on to do other things. So that's kind of just, I happen to fall into more of that, and I really feel like I fell into it.
So you'll continue with your current job, right, for a little while?
Yes.
Then until you no longer need to be bivocational?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, what was the name of the church in Waco again?
Gathering.
Is it Gathering Lutheran Church?
If you search it, it's gatheringwaco.org, I think is the webpage.
Gatheringwaco.org.
Okay. Yeah, so it's in Robinson. They're connecting it to Waco, but Robinson's the focus or the bulk of the ministry. And then I guess another thing to say is, so now I don't know if Micah's familiar with this terminology, but so Gathering it's still new enough that it's a church in formation. Have you heard much talk about churches in formation?
No, I can kind of gather what they're talking about. But
that was funny.
I'm a funny person. I'm a fun guy. So yeah, expand on that, if you will, Rory.
So then the church in formation it hasn't been chartered yet. So it's a church it's a church that's still building up to be a chartered church. So basically what that means is that it's still in the plant phase, and basically they just there's not a whole lot more they have to do. They've got to put together like the bylaws, the church constitution, all that kind of stuff. They haven't done that yet. So they're still technically a church in formation. So Gathering doesn't have a called pastor. Pastor Jerry's call is to the district, the Texas district, right? Because Gathering can't call a pastor yet. Once they get chartered, then they can call a pastor, which would probably be Pastor Jerry for like maybe a year until he wants to retire in a couple of years, and then I would take over as the first Timothy pastor.
How long have they been meeting? Like, how long have they been in process?
So I'd say really just a little over a year. Maybe 2 or 3 months ago they had like a 1-year barbecue. So hasn't been around too long.
Gotcha. And did they have like families that maybe moved with them, or was it just a ground floor start from scratch?
So I keep mentioning Fortress, right? So Fortress is the church in Harker Heights. So that's my membership is through Fortress, right? Because Gathering's not a chartered church yet, so they can't have members yet. So Gathering or Fortress sent out Gathering, right? So I'm kind of the going into the plant of another church plant, right? But so most of the people were there's been a lot of organic growth too. They're very involved in the community. We volunteer, and actually Pastor Jerry is the head of on the board for this food bank. So they're very involved in the food bank. So we've met people through the food bank. And we pack groceries, and then once a month we hand out groceries and then pray for people or they do. I haven't been able to get over there yet to do that, but that's one of the ways I met people. But then people have come from St. Paul's, right? Every Lutheran church is called St. Paul's, but St. Paul's Belmead, which is Waco area, and then Trinity, which I think is Hewitt. Don't quote me on that, but another local LCMS church in the area. People have kind of come together from those two churches to pull together Gathering.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Hey, this is a Gathering is a LCMS church, right?
Yes.
Okay. I have so many questions based off of y'all's website, man.
Yes.
But I don't want to. Really don't want to I'm gonna try to I don't want to be myself while I'm asking. So
that's fine.
John's a troll.
Because I've gone to a lot of conferences, sat on a lot of Zoom calls, and met a lot of people from different networks and different things. So everything on here, it seems very I've seen before.
Sure, no, it's fine.
And so I don't mean that to be demeaning by any means.
No, because Pastor Jerry is very involved in that world. So
okay,
yeah,
gotcha. That makes sense.
No, yeah, that's there's a book. I haven't read it yet, but you might have. Maybe you've heard of these guys. Let me pull it up here. And they're actually having a conference in Dallas in a couple of The Forgotten Ways, Alan Hirsch. You guys ever heard that name?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know who Alan Hirsch is. I actually there's things about Alan Hirsch that I appreciate.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if he is Baptist, but he goes to I was a part of a Baptist collegiate ministry when I was in college, and he spoke at them. And he seems to be, based on what I know about him, he seems to be one of the people who has not what I would probably say is has not abandoned basic orthodoxy that tends to exist in probably what some people would probably consider more of the more liberal lanes, I guess.
Probably emergent church at one point.
Yeah, he tends to dabble around there.
The
missional, at least he used to. Maybe he doesn't anymore.
They're really missional.
Yeah, he's really big on missional living, missional church, the organic church, and all these different kind of things. People trying to teach people to think more like that.
That's
as
very
opposed
much
to
the atmosphere of Gathering. Yeah, very much so. Yeah,
and that's one of the few good things that probably came out of the whole emergent thing. Was people thinking more living on mission with their everyday life kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm on mission when I go to work. I'm on mission in my neighborhood. I'm on mission those things. That's one of the few good things, I keep saying few, that kind of came out of that was missional living and community and that kind of thing.
Right.
So I think so that's kind of why I say he was one of those people.
Yeah, no, and that's all fair. So then Hirsch also does the what is that? Pastor, prophet, priest, evangelist, shepherd. There's a thing called an APEST.
Yeah.
Have you heard about the APEST?
Yeah,
he has his own personality test too.
I forget.
I
I forget what I
took
was.
that. I came in as a pastor shepherd, so it's that fivefold. I don't want to get too far into that because that stuff does start getting a little controversial. But the fivefold ministry, kind of,
as long as you don't take it too seriously, it's interesting.
It is what it is. But it's just someone like you who's kind of been around and you can recognize it. So even the catch line, like imperfect people, right? It's if you look at the website, you might not even, like you asked, this is a Lutheran church. It's very much Lutheran in theology, but
so that's kind of one of the things I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah,
and so I assume people from your church might watch this, and your pastor might watch that. So what I say is like I'm trying to make sure it's not a criticism of the local church,
right?
But like I've become like very jaded about some of this stuff.
That's fine.
Which is some things I probably need to work out.
Yeah.
And so like I want to make that perfectly clear that I'm not criticizing.
No, it's fine.
And some things that I may or may not say.
You wouldn't say anything worse to me than people on my own denomination.
But based on what I've seen, man, like a lot of Lutheran churches are very proud about being Lutheran.
Very much so.
As opposed to like where I'm from, the evangelical Baptist world, where it's like, well, maybe after they've been members for 10 years, we'll let them know we're part of the SBC. And like, there's nothing that indicates you're Baptist at all. Like, even like if you're a members class, it might come up in your members class, like that we give to the SBC and that kind of thing.
Right.
And so, based on what I've seen, and this is all from the outside looking in, most Lutheran churches are very proud about being Lutheran.
Yes.
And I noticed that y'all don't have the L word anywhere on y'all's website. So I was kind of curious about that.
Right. Yeah. So I think that also has to do with being a church in formation. I don't know. Because it's not a chartered church. I've a little bit unclear about how all that still kind of works too. But I mean, you're not saying anything that's, you're just speaking your mind or whatever. But I think just keeping in mind being missional, being intentional, and being relational. It's a Lutheran church that isn't necessarily trying to attract other Lutherans or attract other Christians. It's a church that wants to meet the community and wants to take the message of Christ to the unchurched, right? So,
and which I get that and totally respect that and believe in that.
Yeah.
So like, are y'all just hoping that when they show up on Sunday that they're not going to get caught off guard by like the liturgy and stuff?
I don't know. Was that before you jumped on? We just had visitors that walked out of the service because we still do have liturgy. we still have, they were a Baptist family that came on infant baptism. This is the body and blood of the Lord. Like none of that is compromised. That is, we're clear about that stuff. So that's why I say it's Lutheran in theology. Like the Lutheran theology is still very much there. It's just maybe just detached from some of the more traditional. I'm going to be careful how I enter this too, because I don't need the trads to come after me, but that might.
Oh, dude, I'm all about like
some of the more traditional forms of running a Lutheran church. Is that a safe answer?
Yeah, dude, we can piss off the trads as much as y'all want. I got no time for that crap.
But in some sense, I'm still very much playing. I'm going through the LCMS. I'm going through the district. I've been ordained. I've been approved by the district president. The LCMS allows you to plant contemporary churches. So this is all stuff that's very much within the LCMS. It's just not like you're saying, the typical when someone thinks about a Lutheran church,
We're going to have to rename the podcast at some point, like the Filthy Moderates or something like that. Yeah. It's like John and I, like,
plus those the compromisers.
Yeah. Even before I was Lutheran, John and I would have discussions, and both of us at some level were like, okay, we don't fit into our like tribes.
Yeah.
Like I'm very comfortable and enjoying being a Lutheran. But there was that just level of like, well, I agree here, but not here. And I agree here, but not here. Like there's like, varying levels, first, second, third tier things you either agree or disagree with. And so it's like, you're at some level, you're like, where are my people? Like Are there, and not that we were trying, I mean, I can't speak for John, but at least we were very, very similar, I think, for many years. And we were both kind of like, where are we? We're not trying to be novel, in what we were doing. We weren't trying to be like rebels without a cause, but it was like, where's our tribe? Like, where's,
Yeah.
So rather interesting.
Yeah.
And I find myself, because I'm a very conservative person in general, theologically, politically, and, and yet I'm not as trad as some people, and I'm definitely not as moderate or liberal as some others. So I'm just kind of in the squishy middle for some people.
Yeah. Not if you keep letting your wife leave the house wearing shoes, you're not going to be trad.
Lutherans are they're different too, because they're not. I haven't really. I mean, there probably are some, but trads to me aren't patriarchal. That's kind of the thing. Like in the LCMS, there's a lot of liberty for women involved in the church too, and it's. I like it. I do like the fact that there's some argument about what all goes on, but there's room for, hey, you want to do a contemporary thing, go do it, as long as you're still confessional, right? Like still Book of Concord full blown with all that stuff.
Why is that like still a flippin' debate, man?
What?
Why, like, that's been like a debate for 40 years at least, to my knowledge. Like contemporary and traditional, like
we got to fight wars. I don't know.
I'm so like.
Well, so there's the obvious contemporary that's shallow and wrong theologically, right?
Right.
So you can throw out a good chunk of what goes on in, at least for Lutherans, right? You're even churches. I can't speak for them all, right? But churches that do have a contemporary service or a blended service, or they have whatever the structure is, they're not singing the same songs that Elevation or Hillsong are,
Right.
As far as I know. I'm sure there are some, but I'm speaking for what I know. So you can throw out the charismatic fringe songs, and then you've got other solid ones from, Reformed, Lutheran, or evangelical authors. So the debate isn't really on the fringes anymore. It's more of, I think I can summarize the more trad, and I'm not trying to be derogatory when I say trad. It's just, but I can summarize their argument. Basically, Lutheranism is more than just theology. It's also the forms of worship and the historical liturgy that goes back to what it was, the Western Rite sort of thing. Right. So, was it Melanchthon? I think it's in the Book of Concord where he says, we do not abolish the Mass. We celebrate it with all reverence. Right. So that's one of the places they draw it from. So for some people, the form of Lutheran worship is or should be indistinguishable from the theology. They go together. So they view losing or laying down some of the form as a compromise in a sense with the theology.
Yeah.
Or
that's a good way to put it. But I would, again, it's the caricatures, right? So you hear some of these rad trads, mad trads, whatever you want to call them. You hear them talk about contemporary churches, and I think we're swinging from the chandeliers and zip lining and smoke machines. It's like, again, that's a caricature. Just like we could caricature the trads as all the chosen frozen. All you guys care about is your rituals, and all you care about is just being old, and all that. We could say that kind of stuff too. But Gene P and the spirituality of the cross, he says, even when we do contemporary worship, we still don't do it like other people. We still do contemporary worship like Lutherans, right? So even if you're singing a Chris Tomlin song on Sunday morning, you're still sprinkling babies. We're still celebrating the Mass. We still have it every week. We still have the Lord's Supper, and we are very clear. This is not memorial. This is not just spiritual. This is the body, the body and the blood of the Lord Jesus Christ. We just don't care to get into the nitty gritties and try to explain it away, right? Like that kind of stuff. Now, there might be traditional churches that are getting away from that stuff, or contemporary, churches that are getting away from that stuff. But the two that I've been involved with, no, very much not the case. Yeah. So I don't want to do the contemporary traditional debate, and I don't want to do it from the caricature. I don't think that's helpful, and I hate the wars. I don't know if you know this, Micah, but they just voted. There were people that want to shut down S&P. They want to raise the regulations on S&P. There are people that want to shut down the contemporary churches. So there are very much people in the LCMS that want to go for both, right? But we have a synod president who is still willing to have that conversation with people who feel like or think that the contemporary worship is something to consider and to develop.
One second. I feel like at some level, both of the arguments that I've seen arguments from both sides, and they're both the two arguments I'm thinking of. They're not the only ones, but the two that I'm thinking of are both reminiscent of the seeker-sensitive movement. When they say, "If we build it, they will come," and the one side is saying, if we're stealth Lutherans, then we'll win more. Right. And the other side is saying, if we're uber trad, we'll win more.
Proud Lutherans,
Yeah. So and like I'm very proud to be a Lutheran, but like they're both making the same argument that the form of the thing will attract people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I thought that was I was amazed at my insight.
I think that's fair. No. Yeah, very much so. And I was talking to somebody and they're like, "Rory, you confuse me because you go to the contemporary church, but you're very traditional." It's like, yeah, bro, I read the church fathers. I read Johann Gerhard. I mean, I read Chemnitz. Like, yeah, theology's my jam. And I love that because to me, to do missional, to do relational, we have to do that on the rock solid foundation of our theology, and that to be Lutheran is to be a confessional Christian, right? Yeah. And I'm never going to compromise that. To me, we are best in the world when we know our stuff the best, right? So again, I think it just kind of goes back to this, contemporary church. You guys you're sitting around reading Rob Bell. It's like, well, no, like we go to the same seminaries as you guys. We go to Fort Wayne. We go to St. Louis. Obviously, Concordia has no problem with contemporary churches or anything like that. So, again, I think that's just where the character, I know I keep throwing that word out there, but where we get these false pictures in our head, these straw man pictures in our head, and we don't really hear out the other side as best as we ought to.
I mean, so on the note of what y'all are just saying, whenever you hang around like a lot of like ministry and church planning events and stuff, like I'm about to say like becomes cliche, but it's like it's ultimately true. It's like you can be like culturally relevant without forsaking your orthodoxy in your faith, and that should ultimately be the goal of every church and missionary and Christian. And so the things that are trad today were contemporary historically.
Right.
Like the music, that the way they wrote it, they pinned it on, like that was the modern contemporary thing of their day.
Right. And
because culture kind of changes, music changes and those kind of things, technology always has been developing since ever. Like things change and look different.
Right.
And so like there's a lot of people that tend to think, well, we have to, like, in all ways of life, be the complete opposite of the culture, and then, like, that's the way we're supposed to do life. Like, you cannot read the apostles, especially Paul, and believe that, like, at all. Like, when he says, like, I became X so that I could win some, like, he wasn't going into that city or that people group basically trash-talking them about who they were in every ounce of their being, and then expecting to walk out of that town with some. It's like, I became a Gentile to win Gentiles, becoming the law to win those under the law, and so on and so on and so on.
Uh-huh.
And so the idea like of the trads who are like, we just got to keep being this, and then they'll flock to us. Like this doesn't make sense.
Right.
But at the same time, like being modern doesn't mean you give up orthodoxy. Like that's also another mistake.
Yeah.
You don't give up like your faith to win some. Actually, history has taught us if we do that, we actually end up losing, which is actually interesting.
Right.
But like you have to know your place and time and what to do and go forward like in that.
Yeah.
I was talking to Pastor Peter Noble, who's Lutheran Church Australia, a couple weeks ago, and he brought up the Chesterton quote that basically says, "Don't move the fence unless you know what the fence is there for." Like, you don't throw down tradition if you just for the sake of it.
Right.
You need to understand, why it's there, and that sort of thing. It's not saying you can't remove the fence. It's saying, there should be understanding. So,
and I think
I really want to hang out with that guy.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, that guy's hilarious.
Yeah, and I think there's, and I think just in as far as the confessions go, those passages on adiaphora, and I think there's a lot of debate on what is actually being said there, because it does say that you can remove a ceremony or add a ceremony as it goes. But there's, like I said, there's debate on, because again, both sides are going to try to use those passages to, I could do contemporary worship. This is adiaphora. It says we aren't going to draw up any hard lines on what our services actually have to look like. And then on the more traditional side, I don't even want to use that contemporary versus traditional, because I'm a very traditional individual. I catechize my kids. You know what I mean? It's like my children are baptized. Like I'm traditional in that sense. But then there's the question of, adiaphora really only means during persecution, or we can do this, we can do that, right? They're going to use those passages to support their own arguments as well.
Yeah. I was thinking earlier when you guys were talking about missional, it was reminding me, just because I was interested in that movement, I don't know, at least a decade ago, I'd say. I was kind of reading a lot of the material and kind of in touch with that a bit. But now as a Lutheran, it seems to me that that's almost a indirect rediscovery of like the doctrine of vocation, which is more of a Lutheran kind of distinctive. But basically, the terminology of being on mission in your life, like whatever sphere of life you're in.
Hey, hold on, dude. Reformed people love the doctrine of vocation too, man. Like, y'all can't just claim everything that
it's all ours.
Luther was hey, look at me.
Dude, he's one of ours too.
I'm the captain now. Luther would rather drink. Luther would rather drink blood. I said Luther would rather drink blood with the papists than wine with the enthusiasts. So, no.
See how that applies here.
But I would say, like Luther, one of the reasons he started working on, or developing the doctrine of vocation, not that he pulled it out of nowhere, right? But it was the focus that a shoemaker is just as holy of a vocation as a monk or a nun,
right?
And so yes, we were the first, John. Come join us. So, but he would talk about how you do things to the glory of God. The Reformed, of course, as well, are really big on whatever you do, do it to the glory of God. But yeah, it just kind of reminded me of that, because I was like, man, I hadn't thought in the terms of like on mission in years, hadn't used that language. And I'm like, wait a second, that reminds me of like, as you serve, like as you make a shoe, you're serving your neighbor.
Right.
Anyways, it was a random thought that I wanted to come back to before I forgot.
Yeah.
Dude, if somebody drove you through the ringer on that shoe quote on Facebook a few months ago. One of us, was it me that posted that quote about the shoemaker thing?
Oh no, because
somebody ran one of us through the ringer.
Luther does have a quote about shoemakers or something like that, but it wasn't that quote. That quote was basically, you're not a Christian cobbler if you put crosses on shoes. Apparently that's what it was. That's, I think, not I don't know if it can't be attributed to him accurately, or if we're not sure if he said it or not.
Right.
So someone was like, "Hey, that's not a Luther quote."
Legendary guys who a lot of stuff gets attributed to them, and they're like, "Yeah, he might not even."
Well, there was these things called table talks, and basically it was people who said, "Oh, Luther said this in this table talk," but it wasn't written down directly. So there's all sorts of there's all sorts of like Roman Catholics that are like, "Hey, Luther said that Jesus did XYZ," and they're like, "It's in table talk," and it's like, well, that's like a third party source that can't be verified. So
he was talking smack with his boys, had a couple too many drinks, and said something weird, and someone was recording it. But back to the missional thing, I think the doctrine of vocation is important there too, because even if the church is going out there and they're doing their duties and they're trying to influence people for Christ, the Lutheran emphasis still is there's only so much you still can do. You can talk to them, you can love them, you can counsel them, you can even give them law and gospel, but you're not going to preach to them. You'll never give them a sermon, and you're never going to give them the sacrament, right? You still always need the pastors for that. So I think it helps us in our missional efforts because we have that understanding of vocation. If that makes sense.
Does to me. Does it to you, John?
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, of course it makes sense. I mean, so like,
of course.
I'm with you in when you say that the whole like missional movement is a rediscovery of the doctrine of vocation.
I think so.
Because that was lost at least in the U.S. I can't speak for any place else. That was lost here for a long time because everybody was stupid enough to assume that their neighbor was a Christian. And so like there was no need there's just the false idea of not needing to live like you were on mission. There's no need to think about your vocation. There was no need for those kind of things. And so like having to be retaught like how to live, like basically you need to be retaught Christian living through mission living, through like the doctrine of vocation. That was things that people kind of like had to be retaught again for a while. And so like everything from like the whole like, okay, why do I work hard at my job? Well, it's because you're an adopted son or daughter of the king. That's why, above everything else. It doesn't matter if your boss is a jerk. It doesn't matter any of that kind of thing. It's because of like who you claim to mimic, which is Christ. That's why. Like, why do you care about like your neighbor, your coworkers? Like, why is it like when you go around the different places that you live your life, how you are there like matters because of who you represent, who you claim, and what you're on this earth for. And so like that's ultimately the rediscovery of a lot of like old ancient doctrines.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes back to what is the first commandment? What is the second commandment with promise? Love God, love your neighbor. Well, how do you love God? By loving your neighbor. That's one of the tangible ways you can love and serve God is by loving and serving your neighbor. And who is your neighbor? Well, everyone, but primarily, of course, your family, your church community, your neighbors, in the literal sense. The people that you are directly responsible to and in contact with. So,
Here, let me give you guys a practical example. So, I was having a conversation with one of the office ladies at my work, and she's like, "Oh, I heard this rumor that are you leaving?" I said, "Well, it's not a rumor. I'm leaving in February." And I said, "But don't worry, they'll get you another employee." And she says, "Yeah, but they're not always good." And I'm not trying to brag like I'm the best employee in the world, but I've been very grateful for Centos. They've done a lot for me, so I've tried to give a lot back to them. And I told her, well, look, not everybody's working their job from the same place that I'm working my job, right? Like we go to work, we understand that we're not just grinding it out to go pick up our check. We're going to work, we're supporting our families, and we are like Mike is saying, this is a good work. Inspecting fire extinguishers is a good work. This is a great thing to do, and we're doing this because God has placed us here, because God is glorified in me running around making sure people aren't going to die in fires.
Yep. Amen.
But like, I think it's a good thing though, man. Like when you leaving your job, like is like noticeable and painful actually. And so for people to be like upset and sad that you're leaving, like that's actually in a strange way, that's actually a good thing. Cause like it means that you did that well and like honorably and like the way that we've been instructed by God to go and live that out.
Yeah, it was a conscious decision because I hadn't always been that way.
Yeah.
And I had a bad experience. I came up through the union and I struggled very, very hard. And then when I switched over to Centos, I was like, dude, no, that's not going to happen anymore. And so when they just gave me opportunities, I just said yes, 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 yeah. I just said yes to everything, and it ended up paying off. But I don't know if this was the case for you, but so when all this kind of kicked off, like I went to just have a conversation with my vicar about I was going to go try to do an online MDiv. Wasn't looking to become an S&P vicar or anything like that. And I was pretty happy with my life, pretty happy at home. Wife's pretty happy with the house, all that kind of stuff. And I was reminded that so many guys have said that's when God's going to call you into this, when you're comfortable, you're happy with where you're at. That means now it's time to go do something else with some stretching and some grinding and all that kind of stuff.
The cushy life of ministry awaits you. No spiritual attack, no stress. Right. Your whole beard is going to be gray.
Right.
So I want to see if I can answer that in a painful way. Last year, so it was, we moved in 2015 to church plant. And last year was the first time I made as much money or more than I did before church planting. Mm. So that was the most comfortable we'd ever been up until last year. There's like an 8-year gap or whatever.
Wow.
So like, yeah, dude, we were comfortable.
Yeah.
We were 2 years into buying a house. Like my wife was on the verge of getting like promoted like second or third time. I was making the most money I'd ever made. We were able to start like paying off debts.
Yeah.
Like I could go like on and on and on.
Yeah.
And yeah. And like when we were church planting, I don't think we ever made more than half of what we made before we went. Have still never lived in this house as nice as the one we bought back then.
Yeah.
And so like there's definitely, man. So like we were the most comfortable we'd ever been. And like there was actually a lot of sacrifice that was involved in making the move and everything.
Yeah.
And so I had to basically start a business to make more money than my wife.
Yeah.
Or for us to like even try to be able to like keep up with like to like function properly while we were church planting, to do a lot of things, man. Like one of the reasons I started the business was because I got tired of working 3 jobs while planting a church.
Mm-hmm.
And that was dysfunctional. And like, it also like, I feel like it's the kind of business that freed me up to pastor and church plants, the best, because within reason, like I can be anywhere I want to be and I can set my own hours. Like I'm designing websites and stuff, man. Like I can do that from my house, in a car, in a coffee shop. I can do it at 2 p.m, 2 a.m. Like it's whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, we were definitely the most comfortable we'd ever been, man.
Yeah.
It was.
No,
it was a nice moment.
It's crazy because we've been at this house just 2 years yesterday.
Yeah.
Right. We're on the market. We had 2 showings tonight. Right. Like we're going to Robinson because it's nearer to Waco. Like the houses are smaller, but they cost more. Right. So we're selling this.
Yeah.
It's going to cost every penny that we have to go over there, and smaller house, move the kids to a different district, move my wife further from her job, right? Just it's all that taking a pay cut. Thankfully, I don't know. Church world is like magic to me. There's the pay is going to be decent, but yeah, I mean it's almost like note for note the same thing. I haven't made more money in the last couple of years than I ever have, because coming from California, I make about $10 to $15 more an hour, right? But before COVID, I made the most money that I've ever made. But plenty of overtime, no no shortage in work, no shortage in money, right? Like that's definitely where we're at. And, just think about going to seminary. Hey, would you ever consider being an S&P? I didn't even think that was an option. I'm like, well, Pastor Jerry needs a guy. I can give him a call. And I was like, oh, okay, that's just something they say. Next day I get a call. You know what I mean? Like, he wants to meet you. He wants to meet you on Saturday. I'm like, dude, I'm getting on an airplane to California to go for Thanksgiving with my family. But yes, let's have this meeting before I hop on that plane and go to California, right? Like, and just, all right, let's get this going.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It really does kind of feel just like being at the right place at the right time. And get ready for the ride of our lives.
So you are fundraising right now, which would be donations. The form of that would be the donations are going to the church for the support of this program, right?
Yes.
The Timothy program.
The Timothy Fund, yeah.
Yeah, Timothy Fund.
Let me pull it up here because can you guys still hear me or whatever?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so gatheringwaco.org. If you go to the main page, and then you'll see in the top right corner, it's got the little thumbnails or whatever. And then if they click on the giving tab, the giving page will offer up, and there's a drop down. And it's called the Timothy Pastor Education Assistance Gifts. And that's where they can give directly to support the Timothy Fund. Now, if they give to the church, it'll just go to, the general church. But if we go to the Timothy Fund, that would go directly towards paying for the school and everything.
Hey, man, what does under frequency, it says one time or regularly? What does that mean?
So I'm under regular and it's weekly.
Weekly? Okay.
Yeah. But then I'm asking for regular people who want to support. But if someone wants to go on there and drop, hey, I can only give you $30 one time, then hey, no problem. Frequency one time. But if they want to give $20 a week, then hit that.
Yeah. So if you select frequency as regularly, you can then select the cadence. So weekly, every other week, monthly, twice monthly, that sort of thing. So
and I mean,
there it is. Jeez, man.
Yes, I'm given weekly, but my wife did all that, and so I don't really know what that part of the menu looks like. But yeah, I mean, it's whatever people can give. If they're in a position where they could give more, or they want to give regularly, that's awesome too. So.
What's your target right now that you're looking for?
So I mean, I think the goal is about $10,000 a year.
Okay.
And that's the suggested amount from Concordia. It encourages S&Ps to raise $10,000.
Okay, gotcha.
So we want to exceed 10,000.
Yeah. Well, the Lord wants you to give till it hurts, John, and you'll. What is it? Pressed down, overflowing.
Do you want the Lord to bless you?
Yeah.
Then bring your tithes to the storehouse.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, would love more than $10,000, but on my newsletter, I put $1,500 a month, and that's way over $10,000 a year. So.
Gotcha. Okay, but I think that's an important point to clarify: is the church is managing those funds and paying that. It's not like you're, hey, here's my Cash App, DM me, it's all above board and accountable. So that's awesome.
And it's tax deductible. It's going to a 501c3, like all that's in place. So.
And we'll have the link below where everybody can click to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Man, this has been fun.
Oh yeah. Always is.
As your time becomes less and less free, I'm sure it might be a bit before we have you back on, but I think we'd love to. So
sure.
When is your first book coming out?
Next month. Yeah, actually, I want to get Pastor Jerry on here. They just released the book, Spiritual Warfare. Him and one of the guys at Fortress, or he's the council president, is was a colonel in the Army. So they wrote kind of a dual book on, spiritual warfare, Pastor Jerry doing the pastoral side, and then blending it in with a lot of military history and all that kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. So I don't know if you guys have done any author interviews yet, but he wrote one.
Well, technically I have had one author on. I wasn't really to promote a book, but he has written a book. It was Zach Lee. He is a former pastor, and he is working on another book, but he was really just hanging out. He likes chatting theology, so.
There we go. Who doesn't?
Yeah. It was good.
I enjoyed his episode, man. It was pretty cool.
Rory enjoyed it too, right? Right, Rory?
Oh, I love that. Yeah. See, John liked that episode, but he hates this one.
So tell us all the ways that Reformed theology is bad. Tell John why he should become
honestly,
a Lutheran.
Man, so like in all seriousness, I'm actually glad that like I actually discovered or had shown to me whatever like Reformed theology before like social media like took over the world.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm actually glad that I found like I was saved before social media took over the world, man. Yeah. Because like, dude, the amount of idiots on the internet, man. Like,
yeah,
there's so many toxic like Reformed trolls on social media.
Sure.
Like, and there's a lot of like Lutheran ones. Like, we kind of covered that.
All stripes, man.
Yeah, but like, I'm glad that I was grounded in my faith before all that, because like, geez, dude, like there's so many Christians on social media trying to detract people away from the faith. Like it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Well, and they don't think they're doing that either. I know.
Which is astonishing.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend today and I basically said, if I was talking about a certain person, I'm not going to name him, but, I basically said, man, if he had been the representative of Lutheranism, I would not have even considered it.
Right.
And I've seen that with, people who call themselves Calvinists, as well as the provisionist types, like I said, there's cage stage people in every tradition.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, but man, that's supposed to be a short season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can't all be latent flowers. We can't all be a one trick pony our entire careers,
Yeah. That's true. Oh, he's like every denomination's punching bag though, which I love.
I think he just like really hates Calvinism. Like he's probably just
well, and then they're trying to make it an actual historical case now. So they've got like two scholars with like widely debunked takes on Pelagius and Augustine. And they're saying, oh, look at this, Augustine was a Manichaean. And, and then people are like, he's focused on, like Calvinistic Baptists essentially. Right. And then you've got like Lutherans like Dr. Jordan Cooper popping up saying, actually, and just like ruining the guy's whole career. Like, actually, your theology is kind of semi-Pelagian in this way, and this way, and this way. And then immediately they change their argument from we're not semi-Pelagian to Pelagius was actually a good, okay.
Right. So, yes. I've been hearing that lately. That Pelagius is just misunderstood.
He was misunderstood. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm cool. I'll stick with what I stick with.
Yeah. Well, this is fun. We'll link everything below if you send it to us, and we'll stick it there. So yes, everyone, please, if you feel so led, please pray for the Fries as they're transitioning into bivocational ministry for a little bit, and then full-time and sometime in the future. And if you can, go to gatheringwaco.org, right? Yeah, gatheringwaco.org, and support them with a reoccurring gift if you're able. Yep. Much appreciated.
Boom.
Yeah.
Amen.
Well, thanks for joining us. If everyone, if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe. We're hovering right around 150 subscribers, so we're excited. Like the video, share it. with all your Lutheran friends and your Reformed friends if you want to tell them that they're wrong. And until next time,
preferably those that you want to tell that they're wrong.
Yes. And until next time, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. See you later.